So good evening and welcome to the Lawrence Alliance for Education Board Meeting for October 13th, 2021. Just as we started, I please ask that you rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So just as we jump into the agenda here, we will go to public comment. Just want to remind folks that this meeting is obviously happening in person, and there's also a live broadcast that's taking place. In terms of the agenda items, I just wanted to note that under the superintendent's report, we'll also be receiving an update on Lawrence High School, and so we'll be starting with that topic at the top of the superintendent's report. And I also want to note that there is an executive session planned for this meeting. So this executive session is for one of the 10 allowable reasons, which is thinking about collective bargaining strategy, contract discussions. And so we will take a vote at the end of the superintendent's report and the minutes to go into executive session. And just for the record, we will not be returning to open session after that. We will adjourn from executive session. So we are now going to public comment. First person on the list is Mr. Mali.
Good evening, honorable members. In this important election year, we as the citizens are proud because of the best leadership of Honorable Superintendent Cynthia Paris. Lawrence Public School is on the way to become one of the best public schools in the nation. From the first day of her arrival, Honorable Superintendent Cynthia Paris in our city has begun positive changes to improve our children's public education. 100 days just listening to our citizens and the school staffs and the parents. The great leader has led our public school from the Columbia gas crisis to the worst global pandemic in a century. Honorable Superintendent, policies such as has caused community and parental improvement, has improved the news of the building new schools in our city, makes every citizen very proud. Facility management has improved tremendously. Lawrence Teachers Union must know 83,000 citizens are behind them as we support them. In this greatest pandemic of the century, we are disappointed with Maura Haley, Massachusetts Attorney General, has done nothing. Million thanks to Honorable Superintendent for bringing our crossing guards back. We appreciate, we know how much she cares about the safety of our children. In these dark days of the global pandemic, we disappointed with the performance of Massachusetts Attorney General. We, the citizens, are united to support Honorable Superintendent Paris to create the best education for our children. Lawrence will rise as a united and a strong city. Support Lawrence Teachers Union. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Sarah Banville.
With the pandemic continuing on, Lawrence Public School nurses have found ourselves performing two jobs, our regular work duties, plus functioning as chief COVID officers within our buildings. In addition to the work that sufficiently filled up our days pre-pandemic, we have been tasked with contact tracing, administering COVID tests to students and staff, monitoring attendance, and calling all students who are absent due to illness, advising families of next necessary steps for their child to return to school, seeing every child who has any symptoms whatsoever during the school day, and tracking all of the sick, positive, and quarantining students. Pool testing, which was sold to nursing staff as a turnkey operation, run completely by a DESE-approved vendor, has been anything but hands-off for us. We have been very involved every step of the way, from collecting consents to organizing the testing operation in our schools, to identifying and correcting mistakes made by the vendor. We are responsible for doing reflex testing for positive pools, which involves calling down every single member of a positive pool and testing them ourselves to identify the positive case. Positive COVID cases among staff and students require extensive contact tracing, education, and guidance, along with a mountain of documentation. Furthermore, our nurses have had to deal with a frightening increase in verbal abuse from caregivers who are angry about students being sent home for quarantine and isolation. We were already sorely understaffed for the work that has been assigned to us and have now had 3 LPNs resign in the span of 1 week. Many of us are working well into the evening and on weekends for a pay rate that is significantly less than what the district agreed to pay us in the spring. When a positive case forces us to drop everything to contact trace, our regular work does not go away and cannot be put off for another time. We are still responsible for all the health needs of the students in our schools, and office visits have nearly doubled due to students being sent for assessment for mild symptoms that would have otherwise remained in the classroom pre-COVID. We often have no choice but to stay after school to complete documentation and make phone calls. Many of us are also responding to emails, calls, and texts off hours on our personal phones from families and staff members in order to educate, ease fear, and clear students to return to school in a timely manner. Adding all of these additional COVID responsibilities to our already tall pile of work makes completing our regular tasks and responsibilities impossible at times. Communications with physicians regarding student medical needs, securing physician orders for medications in school, and attending student meetings where a nurse should be present have all had to go down on our list of priorities while we triage the students in front of us and complete contact tracing. In addition, school nurses are now seeing greater numbers of injuries and visits from students and staff involved in the alarming increase in physical altercations seen at Lawrence High School and other schools. Simply put, Lawrence school nurses are overburdened and lack adequate support to do our jobs. Our Director of Health Services works tirelessly to support us, including covering as a substitute nurse in our offices when needed. But there is only so much she can do. We need the district to step up and provide us with the resources needed to properly care for our students, families, staff, and ourselves. If something is not done soon, we are putting our entire nursing staff at risk for burnout and subsequent attrition. Thank you for taking the time to hear our concerns.
Thank you very much. All right, that is the end of public comment. I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent, who will have, updates, but we have a lot of guests as well for each of the topics as well. So if you wouldn't mind, Superintendent, as we get to different topics, you can introduce the members who are here to support this. So the first topic, as I mentioned at the top of the meeting, we'll get an update on the high school.
Great, thank you so much. So as you know, we've had safety concerns at our high school since the second week of school. It's been scary, hard, and no one's feeling really good right now. While we had prepared that our students would need additional social emotional supports, we did not anticipate the high intensity of level of emotional responses our students are experiencing. So tonight, we want to share with you the events that have happened that you all have seen in social media and have experienced. What we learned from those events, our analysis, as we have done investigations, spoken to families, students, community members, staff members. We'll also share some short-term responses and some long-term solutions. Assistant Superintendent Maricel Goris, who is closely working with the high school staff, will begin to share some of those details.
Thank you. I'll begin with sharing that on Friday, October 8th, 2021, there were 2 altercations between several students in 2 separate locations on the high school campus. LHS administrators, safety officers, and SROs intervened to secure the safety of students. The altercations resulted in no arrests, students being summoned to court, and disciplinary hearings scheduled with parents for Tuesday, October 12th, for all 14 students involved. Over the weekend, administrators worked to reduce the number of students in gathering spaces by revising the lunch schedule and minimizing the number of students in the cafeteria at one time. On Tuesday, October 12th, prior to the start of the school day, LHS administrators and teacher leadership team members met to debrief the events of Friday and share the proposed new schedule. While personally conducting several of the hearings on Tuesday, the investigations revealed that what preceded the physical conflicts on Friday was an off-campus pickup flag football game among students that resulted in winners and losers. In total, 14 students were involved, which resulted in 10 disciplinary hearings and 2 restorative justice meetings. The average profile of these students are grade 9 and 10 honor roll students with no previous history of physical altercations who exhibited highly unusual behavior to emotionally charged language and high emotional responses to simple redirections. As a result of the disciplinary hearings, appropriate discipline and supports were provided, ranging from restorative justice meetings, suspensions, and high-level emotional support programming. It was evident that the students had not had the opportunity to practice conflict resolution skills through interpersonal relationships while learning remotely. During the disciplinary hearings on Tuesday, 2 more physical altercations resulted in administrators being hurt while intervening. Those administrators are well and ready to join the LHS community tomorrow. Both incidents are connected to the members of the student audience from Friday's incidents. Additional safety officers were deployed to the campus, and the chief of police deployed additional support to the campus as well. The superintendent will now share the series of events and decisions necessary to secure the safety of the students and staff at LHS.
On Tuesday, I was on the campus at the beginning of the day, supporting the community, including students, of course. During first lunch, as students were gathering in the cafeteria, 2 students were in an altercation. At the steps of the landing, our safety officers, along with Lawrence Police, were there and safely got students to stop the fight. What was incredible was when the 2 students were at this fight, one student passed the phone to another one, ensuring that the student was recording the altercation, and later requesting it for reviewing and asking about her performance during the fight. No one got hurt. Those students were also under investigation, and of course, hearings will be conducted. Based on what happened that morning, we made the decision to have students in second and third lunch have lunch in their classrooms, again, to minimize any gathering of more students, but more importantly, to keep students and staff safe. That decision was not made lightly, as it impacts everything that happens with our staff members. We also planned for a staggered dismissal to, again, minimize dismissing 3,100 students at once. So we planned for a 3 o'clock, 3:05, 3:10, and 3:15. As a result, we did not have any incidents during the in-classroom lunches and dismissal. We then met with LTU leadership, the chief of police, our mayor, and LHS staff at 3:30 to debrief the day, to plan for the next day. We all agreed that it was a very hard day. There were many good ideas floated, including the fact that we were going to be offering feedback on the draft of the new schedule. We also knew that today was a day where students in the upper grades would be doing pre-SAT and SAT, and administrators and teachers had planned very carefully for proctoring, supervision, and a change in the actual lunch schedule. So we felt confident that the day would go out without incident. Early this afternoon, I should say, I received a message from our Chief Vask, around 4 o'clock, that in fact there had been an incident at dismissal that involved 3 students, while in the presence of the Lawrence police, resulting in 3 of our students getting arrested. I'm saddened by that. Our students are in crisis. What we're learning is that independent of all the resources that we have at hand, that is still not enough. We're going to continue to meet. We're going to develop a stakeholder group that also includes and offers and bears resources to our community. And this is going to be a day by day in terms of the short-term responses and the long-term solutions.
Thank you. I'll pause at this point and see if LAE members have any comments or questions for the superintendent.
Thank you, Superintendent, for sharing that with us. It has been, there has been a lot of discussion within the community regarding these issues that are happening and the concern that parents have. Unfortunately, sometimes we have media coverage that does not help in situations like this. Sometimes make it harder for the people in the community to understand. And I think the fact that no one from the school department addresses these issues publicly makes it even worse. Because you are handling it, and I'm sure the communication might go out to the parents, but it doesn't go out to the general public. So the discussions are that the school administration is not doing enough, that the politicians are not doing enough, and it's a very concerning subject, especially the first one where I guess one of the parents was also involved, or one parent, I don't know how many parents. And I know from my previous service as a city councilor, the interaction between the police and the school department. So my question to you is, have you come to any type of conclusion or resolution with the police department to increase the number of officers there, or even if we use community policing, or what are the steps that are going to be taken with that regards? I understand that you're alternating classes and you're changing lunches and doing all of that, but maybe we do have to have a more presence of authority, both on campus and during dismissal.
For sure. So the chief response to the call for additional presence was immediate. So he has provided that. And on Tuesday, if you walk the hallways, our police officers were there this morning as well and throughout the day, including in this last incident that I just shared with you at dismissal. The chief has been an excellent partner and shares our concerns and is willing to work with us at anything that we request. So yes, that is there. In addition to deploying SROs, and then our own safety officers have also been redeployed to the high school.
Will this be something that will be for the full? Will this be something that will take place for the remainder of the school year, or is it just temporary?
As long as necessary.
Thank you.
Pat, go ahead.
Superintendent, I'm just wondering, we're talking about ninth and 10th graders here. Children that left middle school and didn't have the opportunity to transition into high school. They were homeschooled or remote, they were participating in remote learning for 18 months, and that transition never happened. Within that time, I know we talked about getting ready and being prepared for these students when they came back, dealing with the social emotional level of the children. How much preparation went into getting ready for these 9th and 10th graders coming into the building cold, let's say?
Yeah.
Sure. You're right, the developmental jump has been dramatic for them, dramatic. And teachers have worked really hard to build relationships and to connect with them, and still that has not produced and alleviated the enormous emotional response our students are still having right now. But it is a dramatic jump. You're right. Children left in middle schools and then showed up in a high school with different demands and expectations with very little preparation for that.
And how prepared is the staff to handle the social emotional issues of these students?
It varies. You know, we have very veteran skilled teachers, and then we have, of course, newer teachers in the district. And so we continue to also need to support our teachers in participating in professional development, in peer-to-peer, and the needs of our teachers in terms of support is also there as well.
It strikes me that it's incumbent upon us to talk to the kids also. I feel that they should be accountable for their behavior. That's one thing that's necessary. But in the second respect, we have to sit down and figure out what is causing these outbursts. What is it that is making these children act out, these students act out? And I think that's the piece that's missing. We know that there's students that come to us with 3 strikes, against them. They come from a poverty background, some with broken homes, and some with a language barrier. And we expect them to fit into this mold at the high school where there's been no preparation or transition for them. I would almost suggest that we put the curriculum not on hold, but limit the curriculum and spend more time on the social emotional piece and really getting to know these kids and trying to understand what is happening with them and why they are behaving in such a manner. It's just a suggestion on my part.
Jess, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not even sure where to start. I feel like our community has been under such intense stress and pressure over the last 18 months, and there's been huge economic and health impacts. We have, kids who've lost family members, kids whose parents have lost jobs, kids whose families are experiencing housing instability. So, on one level, it's not surprising that we're going to see, a higher level of acting out and frustration and anger and so on being taken out in various ways. I do agree with Pat that I think to the extent possible, and maybe we can use some of the COVID relief money in this way, we have to beef up the social and emotional supports for kids, but also, and this is like a pet subject of mine, but also what are the ways that we can support families? Because for everything that we pour into the kids, if families are struggling at home and not able to access decent housing or decent jobs, then the conditions that are creating this are going to continue, right? So I know that it's not, we can never expect the schools to solve the challenges of a whole community, but maybe we can devote some resources to bringing some of our community partners closer in and offering other support to the wider family, not just to the kids. that's a suggestion I have. And then, you know, the other thing, and I'm probably going to sound like a kind of, you know, old fuddy-duddy in this, but I am concerned by the extent to which social media is sort of spurring and feeding this, right? Because, you know, so many of our kids watch and participate in so much of that, and, you know, there is this sort of culture of like performance and everything becomes entertainment. And I wonder whether, I don't know if this is logistically possible, but I wonder if there are ways that we can more limit, like, how kids are, like, can kids not have access to their cell phones at all, you know, while they're in school. I know some kids need it to be in contact with family members, et cetera, but, you know, I feel like what you don't want is a culture developing around this where it's okay and cool to fight all the time, and, you know, your fight becomes a performance that is then posted and shared on social media, and people are ignoring the, like, physical and emotional pain and damage that this causes because it is all just under the guise of entertainment now, you know? So.
Let me?
Yeah, I had actually a conversation with superintendent earlier today, and we were talking about that this is a cry for help. You know, our kids, we think about the 18 months of COVID. Before that was the explosion. So they have been going from one crisis to the next, and through the process, they have been stability to them. So we need to look at the root of the issues. I agree with you, Jessica, that we need to look at the family. And this is something that the school district cannot do alone. This is something that is a responsibility of all of us here in the school district. And we need to look into partnering with other nonprofits and other organizations that also support families and figure out a way to help the kids. And like Pat said, we need to have a space for the kids to express themselves, to figure out other ways in which they can let out that energy, that frustration, and also think about how we can help them with mental health issues, that there might be also underlying issue related to this. You know, trauma makes people do those things that, on kids that you have never even think that they will do anything, and it just like is out of their control. So I agree with what everybody have said, and this is something that we need to do together and support the kids and their families.
Maria, go ahead.
Thank you. I would just echo a little bit of what Jessica said, and she mentioned getting the help of community partners, and that's one thing that Lawrence shines at. We're great at collaborating and partnering together, and I think this is a good time for community partners to come in and, you know, support the district through youth mentoring and family engagement or family supports. I also want to thank Jess for bringing up the phone issue, because I thought I was going to be the one sounding too extreme or too old for my non-technology type of person, but I think that maybe eliminating the phone to a certain degree during the school day may help.
Pat, go ahead.
Ventura, just one final comment. I agree with Jess with the social media and these TikTok challenges that are going around. It's not only here in Lawrence, it's within other communities also. The September challenge was to destroy a bathroom in the school, take the fixtures off and do that sort of thing. And the October challenge, I understand, through some of the younger kids, was to slap a teacher or injure a teacher. So it kind of plays to what has happened here in Lawrence. Another thing that I think we need to address in this city is that community mental health services are very limited. And in some cases, families that feel that they really need the services have to wait up to 8 weeks or months before they're seen. And that's something as a community we need to address. The mental health concerns and having facilities and people available for our families is very crucial at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent, you mentioned a stakeholder group, and I know it was in a letter that went out to families. Can you speak a little more about that stakeholder group, what your composition, what you're hoping to achieve with that group?
Sure, so the vision is for us to have representation from community members, teachers, administrators, students, families, and quite honestly, anyone who wants to do some good thinking around this challenge. And in the short term, it'll be a daily thinking through and debriefing and analyzing what the current needs are, and then the long-term planning also for sustainable efforts where our students and staff feel well supported and feel safe, and then we create the environment that we've all been thinking about for months now. So the call will go out, and you can expect to see an invitation in your inbox. I hope that some of you on this board will also join us and get you to be thought partners and bear resources in the form of community supports and other connections that you all can make for us.
Great. And obviously, you've heard the comments from at least 3 board members around this notion of how do we sort of view this as not just a school issue or school problem, but rather like one that's going to require looking at some of the underlying conditions of, what was sort of causing our kids, or not even causing, but what are some of the factors that may be contributing. I don't mean to put it back on you, so how are you going to solve it? But I mean, is this stakeholder group in your mind doing what some of the board members are suggesting? And again, just curious how we can continue to then outreach. It sounds like with the police chief, with the mayor, you're already working, but I want to make sure that, through this board, we're able to support the schools to have a broader conversation and broader support, in addition to what sort of we can do. So I'm just curious about the stakeholder group in particular, or if you have any thoughts about how to continue that conversation that several board members have brought up.
Yes, initially, some of the things you've all mentioned were also part of our discussion in the group on Wednesday with the leadership team and with the Lawrence High School staff, which have been remarkable during this crisis. And so, yes, all of your good ideas, we've taken note, and we're going to start leveraging all of those immediately in order to improve the conditions right away. So they're right in line.
And so what I'll likely do is, so this board will meet next week again. We have a separate meeting talking about just teaching and learning, sort of where are our students at, what are we doing, what is the response, ESSER funding, that's supporting that. I know that both through Student Opportunity Act, ESSER, the drafts we've seen, providing support, SEL support through programming, through staffing, I think has been a big priority of those initiatives. And I'm just curious now, I also know staffing's been an issue, not just here, but as I think about across the Commonwealth and even across the country. How have we done with the ability to execute on the plan of increasing SEL supports in the form of additional staff and programming? Just curious, and I know it probably requires a more detailed answer and data, but just where are we with that, or how's it going?
Yes, certainly we do not have the ideal staffing makeup. What we were able to do was secure the additional 7 adjustment counselors, and those are currently on staff. Okay. And those we had been preparing for since the spring. We talked about that during our budget. We started that hiring way ahead of time in preparation for supporting our students' social emotional. We will continue to reassess that, the caseload. Those adjustment counselors will be giving us feedback as to what else is necessary, but this is going to fall under behavioral health now. Yep. Versus social emotional. So we're in a different stage of support here. Not so much just social emotional, but more behavioral health here.
Yep. Sorry. So we, and I don't want to speak for the whole board, but let me try and see if people agree. But I mean, to the degree that we can be helpful in any way with the stakeholder group, the planning, sort of leveraging our individual roles, connections, and then also as it comes to, just from a funding standpoint, like, if we need to think about how to shift resources or I think we'd be open to do that. I'm going to look around, and not an official vote, but I think we'd be open to do that. So, and the other thing I just want to say is, just want to thank the staff, like all of our staff members, because I know that, coming back, all of our kids after a year of mostly remote instruction, and I know staff worked tremendously hard last year to make sure that students were getting support, but we're seeing challenges, as you said, with students being dysregulated or needing more support here in Lawrence, throughout different places in Massachusetts, and I would say across the country as I talk to superintendents. And I think that the ability to provide additional resources, supports, and this sort of broader community approach, I think will be key. But I also want to thank the staff members that are there and continue to be there every single day, have been there, will be there tomorrow, supporting our kids, and to the degree that we can continue to support them, in everything we do, it's just going to be key, because I worry a lot about, and sort of we read articles about just staff burnout, and in general, education's a hard job. And I'll say that having been a teacher for 9 years and principal, and it's really, really hard. And we continue to deal with the effects of an extraordinary situation, and it's just so, I think, eloquently stated, of which we have felt particular impacts in Lawrence and in communities like Lawrence that have not been felt everywhere else. So I just want to reiterate thank you to our staff, just on a daily basis, supporting our kids, and whatever we can do just as a board to support the district, and in your ability to support our kids and our staff. Just please count on us. Don't hesitate to do that. So, all right, thank you. And like I said, we have a meeting next week to talk about, just where we're at with our students. And so I would love to have an update. We just put that on the agenda to also get an update on sort of how are we doing with the stakeholder group, with other actions, that are going on. So thank you. Appreciate that. What, question, comment?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions and a couple of comments. Pat mentioned that, and I think we all agree, okay, there's a crisis going on, but is there really a crisis going on, or are these kids thinking that they're still on vacation? How much of that needs to be determined? That they're just here to have fun and that they want to go back to what happened last year, not because of COVID, but because of their behavior. I'm just throwing these things out because these are things that we need to think about. How are we doing with crossing guards and buses, Superintendent?
Sure, yes. I'll get Maricel back on. And I think Odanis is with us too, so they can both answer questions about crossing guards and bus updates.
Hi. So yeah, crossing guards.
And this isn't going off the subject, actually has a lot to do with these
Yeah.
things that are happening.
So the chief and us met over the summer and discussed transitioning crossing guard budget and responsibility over to the school department to facilitate filling those positions. There was really a difficult time filling those positions and keeping staff and making sure we had crossing guards every day at the locations that were necessary. So we opened up the crossing guard positions as extra duty for the staff that work at the locations. We have 12 locations that require crossing guards. 7 of those locations were filled by staff members at the complexes, and the remaining needed to be opened up positions to be hired outside. Same hourly wage as was offered before, and that's actually the same wage that we were offering our staff as an extra duty. That included not only the locations within LPS, but any locations that the police department had covered for crossing guards. So we struggled just as much as the police department has struggled to fill those positions. It's an hour a day, $20 a day, and requires for folks to be outside in all weather conditions. So I think we're still waiting on 3 positions to be filled.
And the bus drivers?
Hi,
And I
good
know
eve-
this is out of our hands because this is a private company, but
Sorry, Julieta, you had a follow-up question.
oh, no, the bus drivers,
Oh.
how we're doing with that?
Sure, so good evening. We
Hi.
continue to work, and actually, we have weekly meetings with our transportation provider, just for weekly updates. They continue, the driver shortage continues. I think we need to acknowledge that. A lot of our routes are being covered by the National Guards. They are prepared to phase out the National Guards based on the last meeting we had with them last week, and they continue to provide training for new drivers. One good news is that the state has agreed to offer the testing for drivers in Spanish. So that's actually excellent news. They had 22 drivers go through that pilot program, and 22 of the drivers passed the test. So we're very, very happy for that. So, right. And 11 of those drivers are covering our routes for Lawrence. We struggled a little bit with our homeless and foster transportation. To date, all of our homeless and foster are being transported. We continue to struggle a little bit, or our transportation provider collectively continues to struggle a little bit with our sped transportation because of the license needed for the driver. However, it's a daily, weekly troubleshooting with them.
You have a question or follow-up on that?
Yeah, my question was just when we were talking last week about, last meeting about, sort of the issue of staffing shortages, and although I do understand that we're somewhat, in line with previous years, we did say that that the high school was probably the most affected by this, which I am sure is, not helping the situation that we're experiencing at the high school. So are we making any progress in terms of hiring teachers at the high school level, or are we still experiencing, unpleasant staffing shortages at the high school?
Yes, I actually have the most recent data pulled up. And so right now, for our content teachers, we have 3 openings that haven't been filled. And then we have for our building-based substitute teachers, those are teachers that cover for other teachers when they're absent or have to attend special ed meetings or other cohort meetings. We have 3 vacancies. And we did add additional positions, 4 positions through SOA that we are still trying to fill in special ed and reading specialists. So we're still working on those. But those are more pull-out, not necessarily classroom-based.
Okay.
So they're not carrying specific classroom teacher loads.
So how many total unfilled positions do we have at the high school? And what is that as a percentage of all the teaching positions?
So that's 6 out of 250.
Okay. So that, it was like 40-something.
Yes.
So it's down quite a bit now.
Significantly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, that's helpful.
I will share, I should be transparent that we do have teachers who are out on leave, medical leave, for various reasons, either for themselves or other family members, which they are totally entitled to and we're supportive of. And we hire long-term subs for those situations and circumstance, and those long-term sub periods may be anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months, to 6 months, to 9 months. And so we work in human resources to try and transition long-term subs to these different vacancies. So currently at the high school, we have, 12.
Okay.
And those varied as far as that we have several coming back from a leave next week.
Okay.
I think that would have a significant positive impact to the campus to have their regularly scheduled teacher, although long-term subs have had a history in our district and have already built relationships with staff in the building where we know them, they know our students, and are always very flexible.
I wanted to add, Maricel, that the COVID protocols also impact staffing at any given day and week. Because of course, the continued pandemic puts staff to be quarantined or be extremely careful with any symptoms and as you heard, the nurses, they will get screened or they will consult with their colleagues or their primary doctor. And then very quickly, the COVID protocols get implemented, resulting in staffing instabilities also.
I know that there are other districts around the country who have purchased sort of those instant COVID tests, and it feels like that might be a useful investment of some of our relief dollars.
Sure,
because we can get a quicker answer.
Sure, those are the buy next, and then we also have test and stay, but as mentioned earlier by Sarah, those also require support from the company or the party that helps distributing this. It's a very complicated, complex. It's not so much, swab yourself if you think you are, it still requires a lot of screening.
Okay.
And protocol implementation.
Okay.
It's not just self-administer, I'm good, I can stay, right? It still
Okay.
requires our nursing staff to very carefully go through everything and the clearance or not for every single staff member and student.
Lydia,
May I go?
yeah, please, and then
I
I'll
gave
go to
just
Pat.
a break and.
Yeah, no, she snuck in there somehow, I don't know.
One of the questions that has been brought up and that has been openly discussed within the community is the issue of gangs. Are we having a crisis in our school system with gangs?
Sure, so Marisa can speak to that and what we've learned.
Of course, we continue to work really collaboratively with Lawrence Police Department. Our school resource officers have been really invaluable in helping kind of ensure that we don't have gang-related activities happening on the campus. There are students who claim affiliations, but may not necessarily be gang-related. For those students that they are and identify themselves as such, we work with them to have them have some high support emotional programming to help them carve a place for them to still get their education, still make the right choices in school, and adhere to the code of conduct and make sure that everybody is safe.
This is
The altercations that we've had since, over the last 6 weeks that we've been open, very few are related to gangs.
That is, and I'm not contradicting you, but that is not the understanding within the community, especially the altercation the first altercation that happened on that Friday. So I'm just bringing it up because I think it should be discussed, and if we are having issues, we need to know how it's being addressed, so that at least if we're out in the community, we know how to answer those questions. Speaking about ways that we can maybe engage, family engagement, and this has been a very hard issue for us to discuss. We've gone back and forth. We've had many encounters, some good, some not so good, because that is the key problem, the key subject that we need to address. More than stakeholders in general, we have enough stakeholders. We need more family engagement. We need more family engagement to the extent that some of these discussions that we're having here can be had with the parents about what's going on with their kids, and so that the school administrators, the teachers can get to know the parents and understand what is going on at home. So maybe one of the things that we should be looking at is perhaps do some type of workshop with the parents, where it's mandatory that parents need to address. This community is good at addressing issues when we have a crisis, and this is a crisis. So this is a perfect time for the school to take advantage and engage those parents, and if you cannot do it through schools, then do it through the churches that they participate in. But take advantage of this situation now, because it's one way of resolving a lot of the issues that we have been faced with in the past, and that perhaps will help us avoid some other issues that we might come across. That is my position at this time. Family engagement, family engagement, family engagement. If you cannot get that, none of these issues are going to be resolved. Trust me, they're not going to be resolved.
Yeah, absolutely. Next week, we're going to be meeting with families throughout the district. Those were scheduled. They're scheduled on a monthly basis, and I agree with you that we need to schedule additional ones, including at their place of worships, at their place of work, local institutions where leaderships gather and people can be heard.
And then Pat, and then I'm going to move us forward, I think, after this. Go ahead.
Right, just an observation. When we were talking about gangs in the schools, do we enforce, Superintendent, our uniform policy?
Yes, our
Yes.
uniform policy is in full effect.
All right, because, typically if students or people are in gangs, they wear particular colors. And I was just wondering if that's enforced in the high school, that they wear the navy and khaki or whatever the color is for their level.
Yeah, so we actually sent out communication, I believe was the week, on Friday, actually, before the long weekend, reminding families that the uniform is enforceable, and to please reach out if you have any questions about getting uniforms for your students. We saw a huge increase of student participation in adhering to the uniform policy. We'll be following up with enforcing the policy by doing by-floor checks to identify students who are not in uniform, to contact the families and offer the families some support in getting the students the right uniforms that are necessary for that academy. Well, we use a counselor to support the student and why it's a good decision for them. Safety issue, it's what's required. It's preparation for college and career when uniforms are required for their work. We use the skill set of the adjustment counselor to navigate those difficult conversations. We offer them options through Katie's Closet and having options for uniform that they could wear for the day or borrow. And we have engaging conversations with the families, and the families help to reinforce and support the students. Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, thank you. So definitely, we're not done with this issue, but we'd love to continue to support the district, and then I think the broader community and how we're working. And so we'll check in constantly on this, and next week we can have another check-in on just how our things are going. So, all right. So that was the first topic that it wasn't even on the agenda initially, but it was an important topic, and I'm glad we spent the time that we did on it. So. Superintendent, I'll turn it back over to you for the next topic, the CPRO presentation.
Great, thank you. So Melissa Spash, Assistant Superintendent, will be working and introducing our CPRO colleagues, led by Elizabeth Daniel and her colleagues.
Hi, good evening.
I'm sorry, I just had a logistical question before we go on. Is this getting streamed?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
live.
so it's on Facebook, or what's this, because someone was asking me. It's on YouTube. Okay, all right, thank you. But like the usual channel, so people who are, okay, all right, thanks. Sorry about that.
No worries. I'd like to introduce Steve Pearl, who's been working with us recently and in the past year on the Earned Autonomy Framework. So we're going to have a status update and some recommendations from them. So Elizabeth Daniel and Purvaja Sundar are here from New York. So come on over.
Yeah, right
Welcome.
from New York.
And I'll just say, I appreciate you coming in person for this.
Yeah, it's really nice to be here, and thank you so much, Melissa, for the introduction. I'm Elizabeth Daniel. Again, I'm the project director who's been working on this from the Center for Public Research and Leadership at CPRL, and this is my colleague, Purvaja Sundar, and she'll be helping me with the presentation. What we're going to do tonight is we're basically going to give you an update about where we are and where we've been. First, where we've been, where we are, and where we think Lawrence is going in terms of the earned autonomy framework. Some of you have been more closely involved than others in this work, and so some of this may sound like things you've heard. Others of you, some of this will help you kind of refresh your recollection about the work that's been going on. Again, many of you are familiar with us. It's the Center for Public Research and Leadership at Columbia, and we have been working with Lawrence since really January of 2020. That would be before the pandemic. And our work then involved doing a lot of stakeholder engagement and around the learning, like what was going on in Lawrence, what people thought needed to happen, et cetera, in order to consider building what's called an earned autonomy framework. And so today what we want to do is we want to go over with you a little of that work and where we are now. We want to introduce you to an implementation tool. Some of you got a preview of it at the June meeting that was a Zoom meeting when we first met you. Then we want to suggest a phased implementation plan for the framework and its tools. Let's see if we can get our slides working.
Dave, we're having clicker problems. There we go.
Okay.
Did I do that or did you? No, I think you did.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to first give you a little update on our refresher on the earned autonomy framework. We're going to do our status check, and we're going to also let you know about stakeholder engagement. We also want to give you an overview of like our guide to preliminary implementation, as we're calling it, and then discuss our recommendations and next steps. And before we kind of plunge in, I do want to just offer that our recommendations, which particularly involve the idea of a phased implementation for the earned autonomy framework, are really geared towards taking into account the unprecedented challenges that LPS has faced over the last year and a half. I think the conversation that we just witnessed and what y'all are going through in the district right now, and many other districts are going through similar things, even though perhaps not with this degree of intensity, just shows that the pandemic continues to present challenges to schools and districts trying to implement larger initiatives and things like looking forward while they're still trying to like put out fires right and left that make it very hard for districts to move forward and schools to move forward with educating the children. So a lot of the things we're going to be talking to you about over the next 10 or 15 minutes is how these challenges have influenced how we think Lawrence should move forward in terms of implementing the earned autonomy framework. And as we talk about the earned autonomy framework, I first want to note that we can't say enough about how impressed we have been with the commitment of LPS, the teachers, principals, central staff, even parents, in terms of working towards trying to improve the schools, trying to be responsive to their students and to the needs of their students. We've seen it over the course since I've been involved with the project since January 21, and my colleagues previously also saw that. And so we're looking forward to presenting where we think we're going now. And so just a quick refresher on the earned autonomy framework. You got a number of documents, I think, in your packet, some of which included the original earned autonomy framework, and then some, like a status guide that was really sort of an update, a short document to sort of guide you through what we're doing today, and then also some implementation recommendations. So just in case you don't really remember, the Earned Autonomy Framework was developed in 2020 based on a lot of stakeholder input with the goal of providing locally meaningful indicators by which to assess school performance. And all of that was going towards the goal of helping the district and helping principals determine how the school is really doing, what supports it actually needed, and then as a part of that, how to manage the autonomies that schools operate with. And so the locally meaningful indicators, what that kind of means is they included such things as student access to high quality instruction, school climate, family engagement, and the student experience. And those were as well as indicators such as performance on state tests and graduation and promotion rates. Oh, let's go to the next slide. Oh, you have the clicker still. It's not working. Oh, okay, Dave's got it. Okay. So this is basically, it was a school performance management framework. And so what we have been doing over the last 8 months, 9 months now, is we worked with our Applied Autonomies Working Group to develop a menu of autonomies and supports. We worked with a target setting working group in order to determine how the framework could be implemented and targets set for each school on each of these indicators. And then we also designed a phased implementation system for the framework. And where we think we are going now from this point forward is to begin a phased implementation. And we're going to talk about the details of our recommended implementation plan a little later in the presentation. In the next slide. And so I think one of the key things to keep in mind is the collaboration with stakeholders that CPRL did across this process and that people from the district have done. We had 4 meetings with each of the working groups, and those working groups, as I think you may recall, included a number of principals, teachers, a parent, and also people from the central staff. We did more than 20 interviews. You can go back. We did more than 20 interviews with individuals in the district, and we also did work sessions with folks in the district to get a better sense of like what's actually going on these issues involving school autonomies and on school performance, data collection, and all those things that go into the management of the framework. And then we did more than 9 other stakeholder meetings, and that included what we called pressure testing meetings with a number of principals where we walked them through some of their school data, looked at data from other schools in the district, looked at the district-wide data, and then also looked at data from the state, just so that they could see how their school was doing on a number of the indicators that factor into the framework. And so then we want to talk a little bit about our recommendations on how we think the framework should be implemented at this point. So we've provided you with copies of 3 deliverables from this process. One is the implementation plan, the menu of autonomies and supports, which y'all got a chance to preview again in June. And then a target setting process, and then also a process for how the autonomies could be managed each year to align with the overall school planning processes. And so here's our proposed Earned Autonomy Framework implementation plan. And I think one of the key things to keep in mind here is that we are recommending that this be phased in over the course of 3 years. This is a significant initiative, I think, particularly for those of you who saw and sort of dug into the work of the overall framework that was created last year, can see that it is an intense initiative that demands a lot of the schools and the district. And given what everybody has gone through, it was our judgment and the judgment, I think, of many of the principals that we spoke to, that that they're not ready to take on something new, particularly something that has an accountability component. Most other districts that CPRL works with and that you see around the country are not rolling out new accountability measures. Many of them are not even keeping going with existing accountability measures. And you also know that much of the data is wonky right now. People don't trust it, whether it's discipline data on suspensions. You can't look at suspensions from last year because most people were remote. There are just many, many data points that just don't make sense right now. And also, the schools are still coming back into something normal. They don't feel like they're there yet, nor do the teachers. And so it seems that to ask them to start looking at their data and making decisions and being held accountable for it on these kinds of measures right now just didn't make sense. And so we recommended that you begin a process first over this school year of starting to creating an implementation team that would look at how this should be implemented in detail, and that should include principals, and begin the work of doing the consistent data collection among all of these indicators so you can kind of test it and see how the framework works in a real school year situation. And then in 22-23, we think that, again, working with this implementation team, you begin to do an initial target setting process based on data availability. And then along with the working with the implementation team, again, I think throughout this process, it's important to keep in mind that you want to have a team of people from different levels of the district working on this so that people understand what it's trying to do and understand their role in it. I think the collaboration is critical to its success as a tool for school improvement. And again, in 22-23, you'll do additional work to make sure that the framework processes align with the other district planning processes. And I believe at that point, too, there should be a plan to update the menu of autonomies and supports, particularly looking to the capacity of the district to provide the supports that are built into the menu. And then in 23-24, we recommend that if the district is ready, that's when you begin the full rollout of doing target setting and applying the autonomies at that point. And by that point, you would have had 2 years of testing these different tools, 2 years of testing the framework, and 2 years of critically communicating with your community around what this is doing, because it's not intended to be a punitive document. The accountability in it is all geared towards building stronger school communities and helping schools see how they can be stronger communities. So one of our key points, or our key elements here, was our menu of autonomies and supports, which you did get a chance to see in June, but Purvija is going to talk a little bit about the autonomies and some changes there, and then also about target setting.
Thank you, Elizabeth. During the phase 1 of this project in early 2020, CPRL's team spoke with many stakeholders in LPS and found that there was a need for clarity about what kind of autonomies or areas of school-based decision-making are available to schools. As part of our recommendation for implementing the Earned Autonomy Framework presented in 2020, the LAE recommended that the autonomies and the processes needed to be much clearer. So before the framework is implemented, LPS, in collaboration with CPRL, planned to develop a menu of autonomies as part of its phase 2 work. The first draft of the menu, which was shared with you in June 2021, was built around 7 areas of autonomy that we identified through a review of past LPS practices, contribution from the working groups, and desktop research about other districts. The 7 areas are curriculum, assessment, budget, staffing, schedule and calendar, professional development, and school culture and policies. Over our several months of facilitating these working groups, we have learned that there was an interest in ensuring a collaborative process and that supports needed to be included just as much as the autonomies. And during the summer, we built out the supports, as you will see here, and also in the menu that was provided in your materials. We also developed designations as part of this framework, which will allow LPS and the schools to identify where support is most needed and to provide varying levels of autonomy. The proposed designations are succeeding, developing, and focus. Please do note that these names are not written in stone. Another integral part, next slide. Thank you. Another integral part of the Earned Autonomy Framework is the target setting, which Elizabeth earlier spoke about, which is a collaborative process by which the district and school can measure performance based on indicators built into the framework. Our recommended target setting process is a result of the work with the target setting working group. This process has been broken down into 5 main steps, which ranges from checking for availability of data, identifying benchmarks, and to eventually setting targets. A huge part of this work was also centered around pressure testing, as mentioned by Elizabeth, which involved walking a handful of principals through their school's performance on some of these indicators, checking it against the district's performance and state data wherever available. The major goal of this exercise was for principals to not only think through what they might learn from this data, but also for us to understand what might be relevant in the target setting process. This was an extremely collaborative process which allowed for extensive school and principal input, which will also be further built out with the implementation working group, ensuring continued input. I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth.
So we just have a little bit more here where I want to just touch base on kind of the general recommendations that we're making, because I know that the LAE has approved the Earned Autonomy Framework back in June 2020. And you know, we're recommending that it not be rolled out this year, this school year. Obviously, we're in the middle of the school year, but that it be phased in. And the first phase, again, as I touched on in the implementation recommendations, should be really a year of kind of data collection and testing different aspects of the framework to see whether it makes sense, and building out an implementation, you call it working group or team or somebody to make sure that all parts of the district are getting to contribute to what the implementation should look like. The menu of autonomies and supports, while it is pretty fully built out at this point, again, it is a document that should be considered a living document, and as some of these processes continue to develop, we do recommend that it be revisited over time to make sure that it's still relevant and still reflects what the district thinks about what should be school autonomies, what the designation should look like, and again, what the supports should look like, and what the district's capacity is to provide some of those supports in any given year. The target setting process in particular will be, we recommend that it be worked on by the implementation team that should be established this school year. Target setting is the part that I think may trigger some of the most concern among people in the school communities, because it's the thing where they say, in collaboration with the district, how am I going to do and what am I going to be judged against? And we need to make sure that that process is transparent and rings true and rings fair to the people at the school level. And so for this coming school year, I recommend, not coming school year, but the current school year, we are recommending that the implementation plan be developed more fully with an implementation team looking at a 3-year phase-in. We also look at that LPS should develop, along with this implementation team, a set of tools to assist with ongoing data collection, and that should include a framework for dashboards for each LPS school. We also recommend that you identify, or the LPS identify, priority indicators in the Earned Autonomy Framework, and recommend revision to the framework based on what we learn as we begin to try to test some of these indicators in the real school setting. And again, I think having a new working group that is building these elements of this process out with knowledge of the district and the district's particular needs and strengths is critical. And there's a possibility that we may want to consider, or you may want to consider, developing a pilot for the menu of autonomies and supports to see how that works, to do that kind of a process of negotiation around what types of autonomy a particular school gets. But we think that that should be a very limited pilot if it's done this year, just to test out the process. And we did give you an awful lot of information in your packet. One document, again, the status document, is succinct and can serve as kind of a guide to the other documents. But we also welcome any questions now or any comments.
Great, thank you. Appreciate not only the thorough presentation today, but the work that I know I've been pretty close to over the last year plus, getting to this stage. And, you know, should have said at the beginning, just also for the benefit of whoever may be watching, is that, you know, as a district that has used this open architecture model, this is just, you know, this board voted a little over a year ago to basically, implement this process as a way of saying, okay, we believe in school level autonomy, but we also believe in support for schools. And this becomes a Lawrence specific. So it's not, using, but a Lawrence specific way to say, here are the types of autonomies, and to make it clear, and we've been working with staff to do this, here are the types of autonomies that you have available to you. Here's the type of data we're going to be looking at. Some of it is state data, but a lot of it is Lawrence-specific data, things that we're doing, just to try to make sure that there's a process, right, to really match, I think, sort of, I don't know if I could say, well, readiness, performance, like indicators, to the types of autonomies, and sort of make that process more transparent as an evolution of the open architecture model. So, and appreciate all the work that you've done with tons of stakeholders to get input on the autonomies, the metrics, and hearing loud and clear that this board voted to implement an earned autonomy model, and I think where we're at is our implementation is continuing to firm up the processes and sort of developing, again, sort of a clear vision of implementation, while at the same time, I think this point of data, like, we know the state data is what it is this year. We do have some. We have other metrics that we're looking at internally, but, really seeing that we're about a year away, a little less, to be able to say, all right, let's start setting some baselines and sort of build our model. So just appreciate all the work and all the details you sent us ahead of time as well. I would say if there are any general questions from board members, we're not voting on this today. I think we're getting a status update and we're going to continue with the work. But if there are any other questions, happy to turn it over. Noemi?
I do have a suggestion. I read the information that you sent. It's very impressive, the amount of work that you guys have been doing. And I do agree with the steps, with the 3-year steps, because it is true, we don't even have a baseline data, so we don't even know what normal is. At the same time, I feel that through the process, it would be a good idea to build some momentum. And I will encourage that we do, even if it's a tiny pilot, because even that will help you in the process of developing a more robust program, because there will be things that you might try in a slow scale and then realize that that might not work, so then we can experiment with something new. And it will also keep the project in front of everybody all the time, because we don't want to talk about this and then forget about this and then a year later come back and bring it in. This has to be in the minds of everybody. And at the same time, and this is a message that we have been talking about this for the longest time, the family engagement piece. I really want to see more of that integrated into even some of the pilot possibilities that could be happening. So I'm looking forward to see more of this work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One thing of note is just that in the Earned Autonomy Framework itself, family engagement is one of the things that the framework tries to capture, is how well schools are doing on that. It's actually one of the important components, as well as other aspects of like sort of student satisfaction and like what the community of the school even feels like.
Well, in light of the crisis that we're undergoing right now, maybe this is a good opportunity to one of the pilots to be center in that and see how will that serve in addressing some of the issues that we have with the students and their families right now and our community.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to keep us moving forward, but appreciate the presentation and all the work. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And it's nice to finally meet many of you in person.
I know.
Nice
In
to see you.
my mind, you're a little square. Both of you
I
are
know.
squares that I see like over the last year, so it's good to see you in person.
It's almost strange to be in person.
Yeah, so great to meet you.
Thank you.
Good seeing you.
Bye, Elizabeth. Bye, Purvisha.
All right, so Superintendent.
Yes, thank you. Next, we're going to have Portrait of a Graduate, and Maricel Goris is going to set the stage for that presentation.
Hi again. Some good news. We have some summaries of some findings of the work that's been happening. Portrait of a Graduate. So joining today and presenting today are two of the project Portrait of a Graduate design team members, Mark Kempfert, Executive Director of YDO, and Nelson Buten, who's our Director of Family Community Student Engagement Partnerships.
just want to make sure that okay. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nelson Buten, and I'm the Director of Partnerships for the Lawrence Public Schools. And we are here tonight to share updates on the preliminary results of our stakeholder engagement efforts as part of the Portrait of a Graduate initiative. You were introduced to this a while ago, back in May. There was a presentation. So I'm trusting that you remember that, but as a refresher and ground our conversation for tonight, I want to remind people that this, the POG, or the Portrait of a Graduate initiative, if you think about it, it's almost like a unified vision for what is for the skills, competencies, and habits that we want our students to have, acquire, by the time they graduate from Lawrence High School, right? And the idea is that if we have this unified vision of what that looks like, we as a community, not just Lawrence Public Schools, but as a community, we should be able to better align resources and supports. I heard earlier some of the comments about community engagement, family engagement, resources from partners, and there is a lot going on in this community and a lot of resources too. So I'm really proud to be part of this community and also to work for the Lawrence Public Schools. So with that in mind and keeping that in mind that this is, the purpose is to have a unified vision that we can use as a North Star, we are going to frame this conversation, right? So like Maricel said, we have here Mark Camper, who is one of our colleagues and community partners. He's the Executive Director of the Youth Development Organization. Our driving question for the POG, I'm going to continue using POG just to keep it short, okay? This is the driving question. The answer to this question is actually going to inform what our vision is, right? So the question is, what knowledge, skills, and dispositions do our students need to be successful in today's world and the future? I don't know you, but I have a 15-year-old that is bombarded with all kinds of messages and every day through media, social media and stuff. And one of the skills, for instance, is being critical of social media, right? That's an example. So raising a kid today is not the same as raising it before. If we can move to the next question, so the next slide. Methodology. The POG employs a community-based approach to project design and data collection and data analysis to determine what skills, knowledge, and habits of success our students need to thrive, right? It also helps us envision how our learning experience design can help students develop a broader and deeper competencies. Again, that design is going to help us inform that. Explore how LPS might gauge student progress in developing the competencies that will be featured in our POG. That last part is important also because we need to be able to measure progress and hold ourselves accountable, right? And so that we can continue moving the needle. If you want to move it to the next page, please, to the next. Yes. In terms of the methodology, we also want to highlight that since the last presentation to you, or the first presentation, we have made some progress when it comes to stakeholder engagement, meaning all the parents, students, community partners, educators, and that includes administrators, safety officers, you name it, just the general community, everyone who is impacted by the education of our children. And if you ask me, that's everyone, right? So the two approaches that we have taken to collect and invite and collect stakeholder engagement and input have been an online survey that was launched in June 2021, this year. It was distributed via email and social media. Goes without saying that the survey was bilingual, right? The steering committee and members of the design team help inform the questions in the survey and also help with the dissemination of the survey to the networks. Responses were received all the way through August 2021. Then we also did we held a number of focus groups, 16 to be exact, and they were held via Zoom. At that time, we were virtually, right, on remote learning, in remote learning mode. And included discussions, bilingual discussions facilitated by our partners from Great Schools Partnership, which is a statewide agency that provides technical assistance, coaching, professional development, and helps inform state policy when it comes to improving schools. Both facilitators that conducted the surveys were bilingual, bicultural. Note takers were also available for each focus group, and they were all bilingual too. Participants were, in exchange for participation, participants were offered Target gift cards just as an incentive. We're going to talk more about the results and the data collection process for both, but at this point, I want to also pause and introduce, or tell you a little bit who is in the design and the design team. Maricel Goris, who you already met, our assistant superintendent. Denise Snyder, also assistant superintendent for the Lawrence Public Schools. Our headmaster for the Lawrence High School, Victor Caraballo. Myself, Jennifer Mesquita. Christy Gomez from Mass Higher. Jennifer Mesquita, by the way, is from Northern Access Community College, vice president. Alexandra Nova from the Lawrence Partnership. And Mark Camper, my colleague here present with me today. For the steering committee, it will be hard to name everyone because we had 39 members representing the different stakeholder groups. But it's important to know that we have parents, alumni, teachers, administrators, LHS students, members, from the government, for student government, employers, higher education partners, including Northern Access Community College and Merrimack College, and then community partners from different agencies in the city. Now I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Mark Camper, who is going to talk a little bit about the data collection and the preliminary results for the survey.
Thank you, Nelson. So we created 3 different surveys that would go out to the variety of stakeholder groups. The design team took the lead in beginning the process, but as Nelson mentioned, the steering committee was involved in vetting the questions, adding and subtracting things from the initial draft. So their input was vital to the final survey that went out. We had a baseline set of questions, but based on a person's lived experience, whether you were a parent, an alum, you may have received additional questions, so we were able to capture different aspects of their relationship and experience with the school system. The community stakeholder group did include parents, alumni, employers, private and nonprofit, and then students received their own survey, staff, including teachers, and as Nelson mentioned, custodians, coaches, guidance counselors, all staff or employees of the school district were invited to participate. We had what we found to be a good response rate. It's clearly not touching the full scale of the district, but this survey went out at a time toward the end of remote learning when schools and organizations and the city had been almost bombarding families with virtual surveys to assess if their needs were being met and how online learning was going. So we did know that there was a little bit of survey fatigue at the time that this got out, but we were pretty happy with the distribution of responses. 79% of all the community responses came from parents, which we thought was very encouraging, and not mutually exclusive because you could also have parents who were alumni. Almost a third were alumni who had graduated from LHS. 70% of the total student respondents are active in the high school and were in grades 10 or 11, and half of the staff were teachers. We had high female representation at the initial collection, and our steering committee made a push to try to increase male participation in the online survey. That was most successful with the students and primarily through some of the coaches who were able to get the student athletes to respond in addition. So over 1,600 responses, and this was the start with the quantitative portion. Next slide. One aspect of the survey that was similar across all of the stakeholder groups, respondents were asked to rank on a scale of 1 to 10 how important they found a certain set of attributes or skills. And most of these were drawn from research in advance, but we see some great themes. And so self-care, management of personal finances, perseverance across all stakeholder groups were very consistently ranked at a 10, being one of the most important skills and attributes they can acquire through their high school experience. Another phrasing of a set of questions were most important skills to develop, and we saw across the top effective communication, which we'll hear later carries through some of our focus group findings as well, but also showing empathy and compassion, setting and meeting long-term goals. These are all things that were ranked across the board as some of the most important attributes and skills that our graduates could have. Next slide. We wanted to call out responses from the community stakeholder group, specifically the question, does LPS effectively train students in the skills that were mentioned above? Nearly half were definitive in yes. And we were also tracking a bit, has the pandemic changed your beliefs about which skills are important in work and life? And again, pretty resounding yes. So on the design team and in the steering committee, we were looking at some of these results and wondering, but believing pretty firmly that had this survey gone out in 2019, we may be finding some different skills and attributes that were ranking higher than what we're experiencing right now. Next slide. Alumni in particular were a wealth of information here. 56% responded that they felt very well prepared or somewhat prepared to enter the workforce or college. When given an open response about what they would change on their high school experience, it varied everything from nothing to everything. But there was a number of responses expounded on real-life learning opportunities, very practical skills like filing taxes, and career-oriented opportunities like internships and networking in the city, but also beyond. Next slide. Some of the different input we got from students were ranking things that they wish they could change about their school experience. Overwhelmingly, more career-related activities was number one. 60% of our student respondents selected that as one of their 3 areas that they would change. It's good to know that even before this survey went out, the high school had already been taking steps in this direction to get more internship and work-study opportunities in front of students, and that work has continued this year. Further down on the list, but still very consistent, between 20 and 25%, you see things like extra help with schoolwork, more attention from guidance counselors, more project-based learning, and 12% wouldn't change anything. Next slide, thank you. We were also asking students what they're looking forward to in terms of work considerations for their future. We didn't have anything as high as 60% in this area, but the most popular career considerations at this point were healthcare and business. You see technology and community or social sector work. And 10% are considering careers in education. I don't know historically if we know what percentage of our graduates end up becoming teachers, but this could be a data point to track well into the future. Next slide. Our staff were also a wealth of information and data when it came to both the survey and the focus groups. They were asked to choose their top 3 skills or attributes. So different from the first framing where you were ranking the importance on a scale of 1 to 10, but in this instance they were asked to just choose their top 3. And here we saw high scores for abilities to problem solve and actively learn. And when asked which skills were much more important now in the working world compared to when they entered the workforce, technology and communication were far and away the highest, and that was very similar to the community responses. Next slide. I had showed you before that on the community responses, nearly half of respondents believed that LPS already effectively trained students in the skills that had been mentioned in the survey. That number for staff was only 28%. This was interesting, and we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive with some staff members around this, but one very likely reason for this disparity between the community perspective on preparedness and the staff perspective on preparedness is that the community, the parents, the employers, are seeing the graduates after they leave school. They know how they're performing in the workforce. They know what they're doing after graduation. And the teachers don't always see that. They see what's happening when the kids are in the school, but maybe aren't hearing what's going on in their lives after they're out of the school walls or how well they're doing in their careers after leaving LHS. So again, we'll dig into this a little bit more, but I wanted to call that out for the board's attention. Next slide. The staff had lots of input, many rich responses on how ways LPS can improve. And so that was an open-ended response, and a lot of that work, that qualitative analysis is still being conducted. But finally, for the staff, I wanted to call out, we asked them specifically about their hopes and dreams for LHS graduates. Next slide, do I have? Okay, great. And, you know, as I think most of you would hope, no one mentioned high test scores or straight A's in their academic classes. The staff responses for their hopes, their dreams for the students, all looked forward. They were looking at opportunities for their future, finding their passions, their talents that they can use to build successful careers, and being productive members of a society that go far beyond their education. So that was the first step, was collecting the data by survey, and then we took the next step into focus group discussions, which Nelson will come back and continue.
So again, we conducted 16 virtual focus groups between July and August. Some of the discussions were facilitated, the discussions were facilitated by our trusted third-party grade school partnerships, which I already mentioned. And participants were recruited in different ways, including emails to the respondents of the survey, which is really important to mention, because what we did was the questionnaire had the option to, had the question, would you be interested in participating in a focus group? So parents who responded to that, provided the email, or respondents of the survey were outreached and invited to the focus group. And also steering committee members were asked to outreach the different stakeholder groups that they are part of. So if you are a parent, you are invited to get the word out to parents. If you are a community, if you are a community member, community agency, you were asked to get the word out also to that stakeholder group. If you look to the right of the slide, it tells you the breakdown by stakeholder group. Some of these groups, again, like Mark already highlighted, are not mutually exclusive. We have alumni 7, but that might be also represented in the mixed group. So we might have some alumni members in the mixed group, which is 3 in this case, if you look towards more the middle. We had a mixed group category because we wanted to offer some of the stakeholders who couldn't participate in some of those an opportunity to participate in one, even if it wasn't specific to their group. So we have higher education, 28, you can see is one of the highest. Students, 37 students. If you look at parents, 7. Again, some of those are not mutually exclusive. In total, we have 109 participants for the focus group. When it comes to focus group, it's good to keep in mind that the number of participants is important to keep them at a small number so that we can have productive conversations. And if we have a focus group with 30, 40 people, it is hard to really have good conversations and encourage good participation. Then when looking at some of the results from the survey, some of the findings include different competencies our stakeholders desire for our students. I will not read the entire slide, but instead I would like to point out some of the following themes or highly rated competencies. If you look through on the left, you probably will agree with me that career readiness, critical thinking, self-advocacy, civic engagement, communication and public speaking, media literacy, financial literacy, and networking are some of the common themes there, which also are some of the common themes mentioned by Mark in his previous section. When it comes to suggestions for improvement, for LPS improvements, suggestions include changes that support improvement in the following areas: financial literacy, parent-teacher communication, bridging the language barrier for EL learners, English language learners, right? Media literacy, self-advocacy skills, transferable skills, college and career readiness, self-care and mental health, which was an interesting one, and I think it's more priority. We keep hearing about that, right? And that is being brought forward in this process. Also, practical life skills and hands-on learning. That again, that's just no, inclusive. If you read through that, you are gonna see a lot of the other competencies that are emerging from these stakeholder engagement efforts. And then, not to be redundant, but emerging themes overall for the focus group, and which overlap with some of the ones from the survey: effective communication, financial literacy, adaptability, transferable skills, critical thinking, digital media literacy, self-advocacy, networking was a high one. We want our students to be able to network and be able to use those resources to support career advancement, right, and readiness, financial stability, etc. Resource utilization, which falls a little bit under that. Post-secondary college career awareness, multilingualism, and empathy. We want to bring you up. Oh, sorry, this is actually Mark. Okay, I'm just going to mention. We want to highlight, bring back the driving question for this work and this effort, which is really important. We want, what knowledge, skills, and dispositions do our students need to be successful into their work in the future? Again, the answers to that questions are going to help us align resources in the community, not just within Lawrence Public Schools, but outside Lawrence Public Schools. Lawrence is very fortunate to have an amazing amount of nonprofit partners that are always willing to come to the table. And I think we can use this unified vision, once we have it, to help align resources, not just at the moment when kids enter high school or during high school, but early in the process, in the educational career, when they enter in preschool, right? So they can be learning a lot of these skills and being exposed to all these resources as early as possible. So by the time they graduate, they have learned all these things by chunks and being supported through the whole educational experience. So I'm going to pass it on to my colleague now.
So just so that everyone remembers and is aware that this outcome is not just a theoretical vision of a student. This is a product that will take all of this input together, come up with approximately 6 or so domain areas of those skills and attributes for the students, along with indicators for how the district is going to assess and monitor. But then it will become a physical embodiment as well. There will be a graphic design, a poster, an emblem that will feature this vision, this portrait of a graduate that can be held up in front of students, in front of teachers, in front of community members and parents, so that they're considering themselves through this lens, and initiatives and priorities of the district can also be held up in front of this portrait to be considered, in terms of strategic alignment and effectiveness toward the portrait of the graduate. So the next steps between now and finalization, an education consultant, Kate Carpenter-Bernier, has been onboarded to serve as a strategic analyst to help further consolidate the findings and dig a little bit deeper in areas that need more response or information. She'll be doing that over the next couple months and continuing to research best practices across the nation. And there may be further engagement of some stakeholder groups to refine some of the indicators that will go along with the main domains. At your January meeting of this board, we will present a draft of the portrait of a graduate and seek your input. And then by February, we expect to have this finalized with graphic design to begin use. We can take any questions, although I'll probably deflect and pass them to Superintendent Paris and see how that goes.
No, thank you. I really appreciate again, sending them, we had the materials ahead of time and just the thoroughness of the presentation. It's good to get an update. As you said, we did know about, the initiative, and so to see the feedback that was received both through the survey, through the focus groups, some of the emerging themes. So we know you're not done. Thank you for coming and giving us the status, update, but we know you're going to take that then, and we look forward to January being able to see, sort of a more final draft recommendation. I know the visual comes later, but my sense is you'll have it, more refined. But I appreciate the update. I will turn it to board members if there are any questions at this time.
Oh, yeah.
Just, yeah.
So I guess one thing I'm wondering, and this could be a question for you guys or for you, some of the things that are emerging as themes, have, I would think, massive implications for curriculum, for class design, for, even how the school day is organized, because it could mean, switching to more project-based learning and thinking about how do we really develop critical thinking skills, switching to thinking about community partnerships if civic engagement is a priority, thinking about a much more massive program of internships and hands-on learning if, many of the different stakeholder groups were identifying that. So I'm kind of curious as to how that is going to get operationalized, process-wise for the schools, because it seems like there's some pretty radical shifts in there in terms of how we'd be doing things.
Yeah, so when that portrait of a graduate plan is presented to you, it then will actually state what the action plan would be for implementation and what that would look like across the district, across the multiple stakeholders, and its impact on especially teaching and learning. It is, the portrait is our last step of the redesign of the high school, but it's also the flagship for the district in making decisions regarding resources, systems changes, and also curriculum and teaching and learning that steers us in that direction towards that portrait of a graduate.
Yeah, and I think it'll be right on time also for us to be able to leverage resources and funding towards those efforts as we face in the recommendations and strategically implement the vision. I think it'll be right on time.
I can add one more piece. This didn't get mentioned earlier, but this, I know the superintendent's been here for a few years now, but this is not an afterthought of work. This work actually began in 2019 and was delayed significantly with the, the turn to remote learning and dealing with the pandemic and stuff. So this was something that the administration sought after and sought funding from the Barr Foundation to implement and put in place, I think for many of the reasons you mentioned, Jeff. And it's one of the reasons I was excited to join the design team, because I think there's some real possibilities for increased partnership and opportunity for students to take advantage of the things that will help them achieve their portrait.
I mean, I don't know about the piece of teaching and learning, because I'm not an educator. Well, everyone has to teach someone at some point, right? But when it comes to community partners, we have been doing a lot of work in this community or preparing for this for a very long time. I know we always don't see eye to eye, but everyone is willing to come to the table. And I want to commend the work of the group called We Are Lawrence, or the initiative. And we have been meeting for the last almost 2 years online, every week, and then bi-weekly work groups to support families in our schools in different ways. And I think so that has been an important development that we can leverage, build on that, to take on this in the implementation piece when it comes to community partners. I guess the portrait of a graduate will offer a lens, right, for like looking at. I mean, everyone wants to partner, right? But we need to be a little critical about which ones are the partnerships that we want to partner for, which is the best way to use our resources so that we can have a better impact. And I think this is what this can do for us. So I just want to share that, and I'm sure and I trust that our partners will really welcome this opportunity to support our students in a more sort of streamlined way. And it's a living document, so like we go through a lot of stuff, right? Like we have a vision, but what happens to get that vision might change depending on the circumstances. Right now is a pandemic, right? So I just want to point that out too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I read this report earlier today, and I was so excited to just that this is happening. It has so much potential. This is incredible data, and I just have one observation actually on the desired student competencies page, where you ask the stakeholder group of students specifically, what do LPS students need to be successful in work on life? The first item listed is family support, which I think speaks volumes. And I think it's really interesting that the students themselves are acknowledging that, and it goes perfectly with today's topic.
Yes, this is really exciting work, and the voices that are participating, all the stakeholders, the opportunities for all the stakeholders to be involved in this process has been particularly enlightening and reaffirming to, I think, the vision that folks have collectively, but hold individually, depending on which stakeholder group they have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look forward to the update in January. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sure, so next we're going to have Odanis and our Oliver project team.
Thank you, Superintendent. Good evening. We are here before you again to provide an update on the Oliver School project. And this time is on the design development phase of the project. Here with me are members of the project team, Alex Pickram, who works for SMMA, Deb Marai from Answer, who's also our OPM, and Christy Lyons from Consigli, who's our construction manager at risk. The presentation, we hope that is brief, but it's part of the process. It's a quick design update, just sharing with you interior design, some key deadlines for submission to the MSBA, an overview of the design development estimate, and also some budget implications. So I'll pass it over to Alex.
Thank you, Adonis, and thank you for having us here tonight. Does this clicker work? It does. Okay, great. So we've already spoken to the agenda. I just want to say that we're about 30% through design. We're here tonight, really, it's all about securing your support for continuing on with the project. It's a very prescriptive process with your partner, the MSBA, your funding support. So we're here just to continue that. I want to pause on this slide for 30 seconds and just to report to you the incredible support that we've been given by the staff, the two principals of the two schools, Jessica and Shalimar. We know how difficult the situation is with the pandemic, but we've been up in the school, meeting with them, sharing the current design of the project, and they've been participating in the evolution of that. So it's really important that we've been able to solidify our floor plans and really listen to them and get their input so that we're going to have a successful outcome. And just last time we were here, I believe we showed you sort of the live model and some of the outcomes for the exterior of the school. So this is really kind of goes back to the staff, working with them, sharing some of the interior design elements, bright, wonderful classrooms. They really held us to a high standard because at the very outset during the educational program that the superintendent and others worked with you all on, we really talked about an openness, a connection between teachers for each of the cohorts of the grade levels. And so we've been able to achieve that in the design of the school. And so it's exciting to see that evolve. And then you can see some of the live model shots. We have these grade level or sort of cohort level media centers that are sort of split up, resources that really that are not sort of disembodied from the classroom education, but really close at hand to put those resources closer to the students, kind of a lot of the things that we've been hearing in your other presentations tonight. Science labs, this is going to be a very rich environment of maker spaces, hands-on learning. It's really infused on all of the floors in the school. Traditional art rooms and such are maker spaces in and of themselves. So they're really going to be, again, close at hand to the students, so they're sort of connected to all of the teachers within the school. And again, a level of openness, a lot of really wonderful daylight opportunities in the building. And here just a sense of one of the art classrooms. Gymnasium, we have a really, I think, just an exciting community connection for this building. It's right in the heart of downtown. It's just going to be another complement to the public library, to the North Commons Learning Center. This will just be another resource right in the center of your city. And then this is sort of this connection through the center of the building with the cafeteria, learning stair, connected vertically because it is a slightly taller building. And we've been working with the building committee and to also really kind of pick up on some of the beautiful aspects of Lawrence, you know, connecting to the natural environment, the rivers, the sort of the physical environment, and how that might inform some of our interior design. So I hope you've received the document. I know it's a heavy lift. Again, we don't anticipate you reading that. I know Chris Merlino was here today, Adonis and the team. They've been really fundamentally supportive of us. They've been working with us on understanding the document, what goes in. We've probably got 75, 80 people between the entire team working on the document very diligently. It will go in on Friday to the state. You know, so we're anticipating really minimal comments back from them. Your vote in support of this project and moving the process forward is important as we're actually looking to begin construction right in the new year, right? We've got a building that's unoccupied. It's a challenge for the city. We need to get it out of the way. So the demolition of the back of the school is really important. It's the first step so that we can actually start constructing the new facility. And just to let you know, we go through a very rigorous process. We have two cost estimators. Christy is representing your construction manager. Again, we're working closely as a team, having their information on what's happening in the marketplace. You're all very aware of supply chain and those challenges. We're not immune to that, so we're keeping an eye on it. Our construction costs have ticked up, but our project costs are within budget. And so we've got 2 more rigorous cost estimates to go. We do an independent estimate, they do an estimate, we reconcile together, so we make sure we understand everything at the same time. So some of the things that are kind of leading into this are the construction activity beginning early in the next year. Thank you for the support in using O'Neill Park, because we are such a a limited site. It's just that one baseball field. It's not encumbered on that field, so it's actually a pretty good opportunity to take advantage of fixing that field after we're done. And then we have lots of sort of utility work where we're going to be closing Oak Street down with the support of City Council and yourselves. So much appreciated on your support for this project. Hopefully that brought us in on time tonight. Thank you.
Great. So we will conclude this portion with asking for a vote, which I think is required to forward this as a next step to MSBA, correct?
Correct.
But I'll open up to board members if there are any questions, comments. Let me start with Pat, and then I'll go to Jess.
I just have one quick question. What percentage of the cost is MSBA paying, or what's the amount from MSBA?
Deb, do you want to take that, or Adonis?
So the MSBA will always say that the reimbursement rate is the maximum 80%, right? So we, however, look at the cost estimate in terms of the specific things that are not covered by the reimbursement. You know, they have a relatively low coverage on square footage because it's just what they can afford, not because that's what a project costs, things like that. Same thing with reimbursement. The dollar amount. So it's about, I think we're about 45 to 50% estimated of the 132. And that's, again, it's a moving target. You never know what you get until you're at the end of the project, because there are contingencies in there,
Right.
some assumptions made, and it is one of these processes. It's frustrating because you do not know until the end of the project how much money you're actually getting. We track monthly. We are working with both LPS Financial and the city's financial to track this and make sure that we are keeping on top of it.
Pat, so it's similar to the LAE, it's about 60-40. So 40% will be covered by City of Lawrence, and then 60%, give or take, of the total project cost will be covered by the MSBA.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Just go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, which one is Christy? Okay, great. Christy, I believe that Consigli Construction is very interested in having local labor on this project and employing minority and women-owned businesses as well, so that we can make this project work for our community in as many ways as possible. So maybe you want to announce the event that you're going to have coming up. That's because I think that's important. This is being streamed live on cable access and
Sure.
Facebook, and people will have connections to folks.
Sure. So that's correct. We have made a commitment to engage not only from a workforce standpoint, but local Lawrence and Merrimack Valley businesses, whether that's through subcontracts, vendors, suppliers. So next week we are hosting an open house for subcontractors, not to be misconstrued with a workforce open house. It's really geared towards engaging businesses so they can understand the project and potential opportunities to partner with us throughout construction.
Can you just give some details on that? And maybe are we allowed to share the flyer on the LPS website? Because I think that as much as we can push that information out so that we can get some of our local folks, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I can share that with Adonis.
Other questions, thoughts? And Adonis, in terms of the language that we need for this vote, can you give me some guidance?
Sure, I believe you haven't? I believe we shared it, but let me find it.
I was looking for it. I didn't see it in the...
That's okay. So the vote language is, reads as follows: to approve the design development submittal for submission to the MSBA in accordance with the presentation at this meeting dated October 13th, 2021, which the report is subject to revision and final approval by the Superintendent of Lawrence Public Schools and by the Lawrence Public Schools Building Committee representative.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. Any discussion? Again, I don't have to do a roll call vote, but, so all those in favor, just raise your hand.
Aye.
All right, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Great, so our next agenda item is the UP contract. If you're following along in your materials today, I do have pages labeled, but otherwise I will be summarizing highlights of this contract. As you know, we've been in partnership with the UP network, which has managed two of our schools, the UP Leonard and UP Olivard. Last month, you heard testimony from members of the community up Leonard in order to support this contract. We have been working with the CEO of the UP network for the past few months in order to secure a contract that both serves the needs of our students, families, and staff, and that allows and continues to support the autonomies that the UP network under our framework, under our open architecture, enjoy. So I'm going to make very brief notes in this contract and happy to entertain any questions that you feel will be necessary for clarification. On page 3, what you will see is the highlights of this contract, which details that our school contract, this contract is a 3-year, 2-year contract, which means that the Oliver School will have a 2-year contract and the Leonard School will have a 3-year contract. Those were determined based on some measures that we believe need to be accounted for more closely, including the academics of the school, the social emotional well-being in terms of school culture and climate, notwithstanding. So we have detailed very specific metrics to take note throughout this contract and have included summative data. We have included family and student survey data, staff retention data, and of course, formative data. On page 7, what is of highlight here is the authority. The authority continues to remain in my purview to have any changes in key personnel. That again was one of the things that we negotiated to continue to have stability in the staffing of both of the schools. On page 8 of note here, you will see in the academic program paragraph, again, that any changes in the academic model will also be reviewed by myself. You will also note on page 8 that the conversation we started 3 years ago, and this, I'll remind you that we took a vote, this board voted to have a district-wide calendar that supported all of our schools starting and ending at the same time. You will also remember that we also had the UPS reduce the amount of professional development days that they had at the beginning of the school year in order to support staff retention. Because what I learned back then was that the extra additional time was very taxing on the staff. On page 9 of note here is under student discipline. We have been working very closely with the UPS on their current practices, ensuring that they align with our core values of restorative justice, and at this moment, they continue to have practices that are not in line. We have drafted an internal document that outlines very specific changes that must be seen in the upcoming school year. I can assure you that this is a draft that has been thought out very carefully. It's systematic. It includes parents, teachers, and student input, and that I will personally be monitoring the progress of that timeline. On page 12, Of note here is, again, allowing the UPS to have the autonomy they need under professional development and the personnel in accordance to our district-wide goals. It also notes here that, nope, skip that one, sorry. Page 13. Page 13 at the bottom of that page, again, highlights the reviewing timelines. It'll be on a 6-month schedule, and any other time that data, formative data, indicates they're not on target to meet their progress, both on the school culture and climate and on the academics. Moving along, here's page 14. At the bottom of that, again, cites any changes in the curriculum must be approved. We're getting close, don't worry. Page 18, bottom of that page, again, speaks. You will see throughout the contract there's a very specific language about continuing to monitor their expected progress, which is not just meeting baseline progress. We expect above and beyond progress from our partners right now. And lastly, the two last pages here that I want to bring to your attention is page 22. This is about Oliver that continues to need the most level of support. And this one here is again about the performance of Oliver specific to MCAS data, family and student survey data, staff retention data, and formative data. All of these metrics were discussed with UP. Ventura joined us for some of those conversations, so I'm, feel free to also give him a little bit of the questioning over here. We'll spread the love over here. We'll do one of these. It's his turn. And lastly, back to this theme of reviewing and keeping metrics consistent throughout the year so that upon closer to the year's time, 2 years' time, I can come to you in confidence and say that we're not only on track, but we have exceeded some of these metrics. So big changes again. Number one, there's going to be a 3-year, 2-year contract. That is new. We normally have given them either a 2-year very consistent or a 3-year, 3-year. So that is a shift from what we've done. And again, it's under the goal of continuing to provide them with the support, the autonomies, while you all are well informed of the progress that our schools are making.
All right, I'll take questions in a second. Just wanted to say, in my, I'd say somewhat limited, the superintendent and her team were much more involved, but I think that from my vantage point, one, UP has been a partner here for 10 years, in the district, and, appreciate the work they've done. I think with this contract, with Veronica, who runs UP and others, I think one of the shifts here that the superintendent talked about is, I think for the first time, putting like real clear performance metrics, like what are we going to be looking at? And, they weren't there before. I mean, I think there was an expectation, but credit to both, I think, the superintendent and to UP, who said, of course, let's have clear performance metrics. Let's have a timeline to review, to talk about them, talk about progress. So I just think that is, almost as we're taking the earned autonomy to sort of put some more sort of details into the open architecture. For me, it was synonymous where we have a contract, but now we're putting more details around the performance expectations and what we're looking at. So it's not a surprise. So everyone's on the same page with, these are the sort of data points that, that we're going to be looking at. And so, but again, what was great is that the district, UP, all agreed. So that wasn't even an issue, a point of contention. It was just more, as we came to you last month, just trying to make sure we had a contract in place that we all felt good about, that provided UP the autonomy they need, but also us as a district, the ability to, again, point to the metrics and have ongoing conversations for support and just ensuring that, again, our kids are receiving a high-class education. So just thank you for all the work, superintendent, and to the UP team. I know you all been meeting a lot, so just appreciate that. I think I saw Jess. Yep, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment because, you know, as before, I am going to recuse myself from this vote because my son is a student at Leonard. And so I just want to say that if I was going to vote, I would be in favor of the contract because of the provisions that the superintendent has outlined. And, you know, I said, like, I think, you know, I have nothing but good things to say about the staff and the administrators at UP in the brief time that we've been there so far this year. You know, they've been very engaged and responsive and communicative and wonderful to work with. I do have concerns about the framework and approach of the school in terms of some of the rigidity of discipline and the sort of merit-demerit system, and I have philosophical, you know, qualms about this. I feel like I've had very productive conversations with the UP staff about this, and I feel encouraged by the fact that there's going to be a process that will involve parents and students in bringing, you know, up, which brings a lot of strengths to the district, but I do feel very strongly needs to be more in line with some of our values around what we expect from our students and how we're treating them and what kind of, you know, kind of pedagogical tools we're using to ensure their growth and development as human beings. So with that said, I'm going to recuse myself.
All right, I'm happy to entertain a motion to approve the contract.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Discussion?
Yes, please.
I just want to take a moment, as Jess says, to thank the superintendent and yourself, Ventura, and the app Leonard and Oliver for all the work that was put into this. I also think this is a good measuring tool for all of the other contracts that we have in place, and for people also to understand that we are taking these contracts very seriously, and that we will not budge in terms of getting what is best for our students, as well as for the staff and everybody else.
Further discussion or compliments? I'll take those too. No? Okay, just kidding. All right, seeing none. So again, I don't know if this is the way I did it before COVID, but just, did I do a hand raise or just aye? I don't even remember.
Yeah.
All those in favor, how about say aye?
Aye.
You got that, Maria? Okay. And then there's an abstention. Any opposed? Okay, great, thank you. And then the last item, Superintendent, DCU donation.
Sure. So in your materials as well, we have a generous donation from our partners at DCU to our high school learning center for the amount of $7,500 that we wish for you all to consider and approve and get a yes vote.
Do I have a motion?
Yeah, so moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so that moves. Before we move to the executive session, we do have the minutes. I'm going to take the September 8th minutes, which is our last meeting, first. Do we have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Nope. Okay, those pass. And then the revised ones, I understand that there still may be some questions around.
Yeah, they're just the last few votes, like, so the votes are pretty consistent, right? And then there's a point at which we got into the discussion about the MOU, and that had a more split vote. And then, but every vote that's taken after that, like the way the votes are recorded mirrors what the split vote said, and that, I don't think that was true. I mean, I know that I'm listed and Noemi's listed as saying no on all of those other votes, where our no's were just on the MOU vote.
Yeah.
So that does need to be corrected.
So what I'll do is, why don't I touch base again with Maria in between this and the next meeting, and our goal is to just bring it back for next meeting. So we're not gonna vote on that tonight. Okay. All right, so in a second, I am gonna take a roll call vote, which is gonna signal that we're going into executive session. And again, this is for the purposes of discussing strategy as it relates to a collective bargaining agreement. And as a reminder, we will not be returning to the open session. We'll be adjourning from the executive session. So do I have a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion? All right, so I'll do a roll call vote. Jess?
Yes.
Noemi?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Maria? Julia?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So we'll wait for the room to clear, which it looks like it cleared pretty quickly, but so we'll pause in a second here.